number of workforce who have acquired skills on the job or through informal training, practice, or system of learning. A revisit in this regard is a recognition of prior learning system. In addition to technical skills training, there is also a need to invest in soft skills. These are skills that employers put a high value on and increase employability, but are not typically taught to migrants. More and more research has pointed that soft skills are proving to be an important indicator of success in the labor markets. There is also a need to invest in multi-skilling. For example, in tourism sector, workers who can work in front desk of a hotel as well as sales or customer services will be in high demand. Multi-skilling increases productivity, mobility, and marketability of migrant workers. Now, how about the demand side? Most probably due to proximity, India and the rest of South Asian countries often look at the Gulf states as one countries of destination for a large number of workers. Upon the demand of various governments, the ILO has started to do more work to assess and forecast labor market needs in the Arab states region. And we have done one study for India, from India to the Gulf states, just to look at the labor market opportunities, what kinds of job opportunities and what kind of skills to match the labor market. This is just one example on how to look at the demand side of the labor market for labor migration. Now, we know that the Arab state region is just one area of the labor market globally. There are many other parts of the world. Of course, the Arab state region, with their growing population, they continue to drive infrastructure development. They look into power, they look into water projects, they look into roads, housing, school, hospitals, the World Cup venues, etc. So we know that these job opportunities are there. However, the sustained drop in the oil prices may affect the pace at which these projects will be pursued and could also have an impact on the demand side of the labor market, which we already see that there are some declines in some of these sectors, in some of these countries. We have heard of the situation where some workers suddenly lose job and then have to look for a return, to look for job opportunities in the home country. So clearly, when we look into the demand side, there are volatile situations, and it's not always easy to predict the labor market that can really match the supply that easily. However, if we look at India, we know that India migrant workforce spans the globe and covers the skill spectrum, from nurses in Europe to programmers in Silicon Valley, of course, to many economic sectors in the Gulf that I mentioned already. But there are many more to explore. Many OECD countries are enviously eyeing India's demographic dividend. Many industrialized countries in Europe and also in East Asia have an aging population and also a workforce which are quite selective about what they want to do, plus a very general shortage of workforce in a number of countries. So those are opportunities, there is no doubt, that can be explored. However, I'd like to mention also that a study by the Indian government into the labor market opportunities for Indian workers in the EU found that there are some concerns about India's skill qualification framework in terms of standardized training, the quality of the training, etc. So there is great opportunity to look into the current various government schemes and programs, which is now investing a lot in the skills sector that can look into the quality, the changes, and the need to improve on the quality framework to match international standard. So there is huge opportunities for India to do that. Now, it brings me then to my final point, how to match the supply and the demand. We know that this has been always a big debate between the demand and supply of the labor market, not just for migrant workers, but for the overall labor market in any countries, as a matter of fact. And this is the topic that we at the ILO most probably have been working a lot and looking at a lot. And the fact that the labor market also changes very quickly. So managing the demand and the supply is always a challenge. However, here the private sector plays a big role. The private sector often are ahead of time in terms of understanding the needs of the sector, the needs of the industry, and often we are in the situation of the supply doesn't match with the demand side of the labor market. For international migration, we know that bilateral agreements between countries, and India also has some of these bilateral agreements. These are also opportunity to look into the demand and the supply of the labor market for migrant workers. Now, a word about labor market institutions. We know that labor market institutions primarily reflect national concerns. However, these need to be broadened as today the demand and the supply of labor has become increasingly international. In order for India to become competitive in matching demand and real-time and the demand, the real-time information is needed about the job market so that India can organize and be more prepared with its large supply of workforce to grab the opportunities in the global labor market. Information on employers' demand can be accessed through recruitment agencies and online job portals, providing that they are well developed and well organized. Now, between countries of origin and destination, there is substantial scope for more cooperation between industry associations, training institutes, and accreditation bodies. And I understand between Europe and India, many of these initiatives are already ongoing. From where I come from, between ASEAN and Korea and Japan, some of these initiatives are quite well developed. Now, let me mention one pilot that we are working here in India. The ILO is working with Ministry of Rural Development to pilot an initiative in one of the states. The graduates from the training courses are being enlisted with the National Career Service of the Ministry of Labor and Employment and selectjobs.com, which is a private sector job aggregator. I'm sure you are familiar with selectjobs.com. So basically, they can be matched with employers either within India or abroad. And if they find an employer overseas, they can be supported to register with the government's e-migrate portal, which is under Ministry of External Affairs. So this example of a public-private partnership is aims to increase overseas employment opportunity that recognize workers' qualifications. Why I mention this pilot is that there is still work to be done to establish the infrastructure for taking full advantage of the potential of skills migration for a large pool of workers who are already ready to enter the labor market. Now, we recognize that this kind of initiative will take time. However difficult it is, we see opportunities and initiatives, particularly around ongoing bilateral agreement. We see that Abu Dhabi dialogue, for example, also include some bilateral process of, for example, India and UAE corridor. Or India and Qatar, for example. Some of these corridors already take into account the demand and supply matching of American workers. So we can further build on many of these initiatives of the private sector, of the government, to further enhance the maximum benefits of migration. And clearly, from the ILO perspective, Not recognizing the skills of migrant workers also represents a major opportunity cost and opportunity loss. And clearly, India having such a large pool of human resource and also have opportunities to build a much larger pool of skilled workforce for the country, but also for the international kind of work for international migration. We feel that sound policies on portability of skills and recognition of qualifications from one country to work in another country is an important one. And for this matter, we believe that some of the work of private sector like FICCI and other chamber of commerce are already leading the way. The government initiative are also there. The initiative of many states government are also there. The demands coming from destination countries is also there. So it's the matter of convergence, pulling all of these forces of action and actors together. I believe we will achieve a lot. And from the ILO perspective, we remain committed to work with all stakeholders. I thank you for your attention. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bhupnala. You've covered the topic very comprehensively, right from the RPL, soft skills, to the challenges of volatility, multi-skilling, and what we need to do to prepare for all those challenges. I'm now going to invite the panelists to speak for a few minutes each. From the perspective that Ms. Bhupnala has set up, one is that of this whole range of migration from a village in India to a city in India to an international location. What are the social and economic imperatives? The second issue is that of policy framework, and I think we are lucky to have on the panel people who can talk about that subject. What do we need to do to facilitate migration? What kind of opportunities we can create for migration to happen, which means the job opportunities linking the supply and demand. And finally, what can we hope to achieve at the end of it in terms of results, in terms of the economic development and social development that we are trying to achieve through getting this migration and preparing our workforce for the global opportunity. So I'm going to invite the panelists one by one to speak from their vantage point on each of these issues, and please try to stick to the time. We would like to finish it by 5 o'clock. So I'd like to now invite Mr. Manish Gupta to speak. He's the Joint Secretary in the Overseas Indian Affairs, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Mr. Gupta.
Mr. Sushil Rambula, Chairperson for the session, Ms. Bhupal, Director, India ILO, fellow panelists, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and privilege for me to be here today. In the beginning, I would like to briefly outline the broad perspectives of the Indian diaspora, the migration trends that we see in India, and then subsequently I will just briefly touch upon the skills and international migration. As you all know, Indian diaspora is the world's largest. The numbers vary somewhere from 25 to 30 million. And if I may say so, our diaspora is also the world's most diversified, ranging from highly skilled professionals, entrepreneurs to low and semi-skilled workers. Naturally, that offers you a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, from the policy making perspective, this also poses some challenges. The contribution of the diaspora are immense. Every year we get $69 billion of remittances last year. It's the world's largest. And over 40% of these remittances, they originate from the Gulf, from these low and semi-skilled workers. Our contemporary migration trends, if I can analyze, I can put into two broad categories. One is migration of highly skilled professionals to the West, to the US, United Kingdom, Canada, and the European countries. Second is migration of these low and semi-skilled workers to the Gulf countries, which started following the Gulf boom. Now the numbers are 800,000 strong of the people who migrate to Gulf countries. The migration patterns have also witnessed a very distinctive shift. Initially, the states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, they took the lead. But now, if you look at the parameters, the states who are in the lead are from the north. These are Uttar Pradesh, these are Bihar, Rajasthan, West Bengal. It does not mean that Kerala has taken a backseat, but they are more high in the wage chart. They are more in the healthcare providers and caregivers. So naturally, from the government's perspective, it requires very distinct and diverse approaches in dealing with these highly diversified migration patterns. For the case of highly skilled professionals, what we need is a very limited government intervention in terms of facilitating access to the market. But in the case of semi and low skilled workers, the framework for intervention is quite elaborate, ranging from making domestic support framework to the hand-holding till the person reaches the destination, and even hand-holding from there also. We are quite conscious to put up an ecosystem in place where we support the migrant in the entire stage of this migration cycle. It is important that he should migrate from the country with a very enhanced skill set. As External Affairs Minister has repeatedly said, our motto is very clear. Surakshit jaye, prasikshit jaye. The migration should be safe and he should be skilled also. Upskilling of workers offers two distinct advantages. Certainly, one is very obvious, he goes high up in the wage chart. But second, he is aware of his rights and he is able to protect them also, safeguard them also when he is in difficulty. Within the Ministry of External Affairs, we are very closely working with the Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship, and very soon we will launch the Pravasi Kaushal Vikas Yojana. This will build upon the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. What we want to do, we want to put up a India International Skills Centers in the initial phase, 15 places across the country in the select labor clusters. We are going to impart technical top-up training as well as training of soft skills, which Director ILO just referred to. Soft skills in today's ecosystem of migration is extremely important. This will need a pre-departure orientation also, which we are working in conjunction with the IOM, and very soon we will launch the thing. We are also conscious that these efforts can only succeed when they have buy-in by the destination countries. What we see now in the current framework, the skills does not command a premium. So certainly that would necessitate we should have a buy-in by the destination, and that's why Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship has entered into mutual recognition arrangements with some of the countries in the Gulf. They've already signed 2 MOUs with Qatar and UAE, and we want to follow it further. Secondly, within the ministry, we have signed a couple of bilateral joint working group agreements. These agreements, certainly they address the workers' grievances, but more importantly is for exchange of labor market information systems. And within the framework of our regional and multilateral processes, we are pushing the GCC countries to open their labor markets further. We are creating skills databases, and these databases will be used to integrate with their systems, which will promote labor mobility. Lastly, the Indian regulatory framework. This is also radically transformed. Within the last 2 years, some of you perhaps would have heard of the e-migrate platform. That has thoroughly put on e-governance. Now there is no more human interface. Last year, 800,000 people migrated to the Gulf using this e-migrate platform. And this provides us a database including the entire skill set of the migrant workers. But we are also conscious at the same time, it's not the thing can only be accomplished by the government. We all stakeholders within the industry, within the academia, with the employers, our training institutions, we need to work together. If we have to become the skills capital of the world, certainly we need to incentivize skills in a big way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. I think a good beginning that we have 15 international skilling centers coming up, and soon it'll increase to 50 by the end of the year, as the Secretary Skill Development also said in the morning. I would now turn to Dr. Ajit Ranade, Senior President and Chief Economist, Aditya Birla Group.
Thank you, Mr. Amola. I'll mainly wear my hat as an economist and maybe share a few thoughts from my perspective in the corporate sector. But first of all, I would like to congratulate and heartily welcome the comments of Ms. Bunpala. I hope, I wish some of the supporters of the campaign of Mr. Trump were here, because very categorically you said that migrants actually are net contributors to the societies and economies that they go to. And it seems like one of the big issues, in fact, the richest country in the world was built by migrants or immigrants, shall I call them. And this is by far the most affluent society. But the way the presidential campaign has been running, at least from one side, it looks like all the ills of that society are on the migrants. But thank you for making those comments. Another question to dwell upon just for a minute is that migration, and you mentioned, Ms. Munpala, that almost half the migrants in the world today are economic migrants, meaning they are going there for better economic opportunities. They are not going because they are persecuted because of religious reasons or social and cultural, ethnic reasons, but they are going because in search of economic opportunities. And you said something like 115 million migration is because of economic. I think within India that number is higher. Sometimes our labor force is supposed to be about 450 or 480 million, and we are told that at any point of time 100 million workers are actually migrants. But I think we mix up seasonal migrants also. There's a huge amount of seasonal migration within India. So when the slack season of agriculture, people move to the cities or construction sites or elsewhere, and then they move back. So that also is a very serious constituency of migrants. Let's not forget the migrants that you are counting are only the guys who go sort of semi-permanently. But there's a large element, at least in India, of seasonal migrants. So I want to just dwell on one question. When a person migrates, is that a sign of weakness or strength? So we say, oh, Kerala, a lot of people are migrating. What a hopeless place Kerala must be, there's no jobs. But on the other hand, we are taking great pride that you said 40% of India's remittances are coming because of our workers in the Gulf, who are mainly used to be from the Gulf, from Kerala, but other parts of India also. So actually, migration is can be seen from two sides. As a sign of weakness because people are leaving, but as a sign of strength because they are able-bodied and skilled, and their skills are in demand in the destination country. So please be aware there are two angles. In fact, net, I think it's a positive. And today, as we rightly say, you said 69 billion. India gets inward remittances of 69 or 70 billion dollars, the highest in the world for many years, higher than even China. And 40% of that is coming from small tickets of $10,000, $5,000 annually, mainly from the economic migrants who went there with low skills. And that should be a matter of great pride, because these are societies, UAE, Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar, where for every one citizen in that country, there are some 8 migrants, 7 to 8 people who are non-citizens who are working there and contributing in a great way to those societies. So I think in that sense, migration is a net positive, as you said, Ms. Munpala, but also a matter of great pride that these are able-bodied people who are actually found fit in those societies. So if you look at it in that sense, that's the theme of this panel, that we need to have policies to support. We should not be seen, even though it's not just Mr. Trump and his campaign, or in some parts of Europe we are seeing the Brexit phenomenon, or maybe in some countries like Austria and some other parts of Europe, but it's also in India. We find periodically this sons of the soil kind of politics becomes resurgent. And it's important that we should also acknowledge that these, you said that sometimes social and political reactions come to the fore, ignoring or trying to negate the contributions of migrants, and we are seeing that even in the domestic context. In fact, in a lighter vein or somewhat semi-serious vein, what's happening in Bangalore, we should have one of the great migrants who went from Karnataka to Tamil Nadu, I think, can provide some calm, in the sense I'm thinking of Rajnikant. So often it is, the tensions are what is manifest in terms of social and political expressions negates or forgets the underlying logic of economic benefits of migrants. So that, I think, therefore it's very important to have policy support, very important to have institutional support, whether it's accreditation or what you said, for lower skill, you have this whole program of prepare them, guide them, or also take care. Your minister has been very proactive in actually, in fact, even rescuing them. There's this specter of joblessness in some of those countries. So just last few minutes on issues of migration in a very narrow context. So we are a large company. We have operations in about 35 countries, and within the Indian context, and we recruit from engineering colleges, we recruit from management colleges. But what we are finding is that some of our good jobs are in manufacturing locations which happen to be in remote parts of the country. But the young people who are entering the company, even though they may be engineers, they don't want to be in a place where 4G access is spotty, or nightlife, or things like that. So that's the kind of challenges we are facing. That on one hand, there are these great opportunities in remote locations, whatever you might call, you have to migrate to those locations. But unless there is infrastructure, and if they are slightly older, meaning they are young couple with young kids, then they also want to have a good school or a good, that kind of infrastructure, recreational. So as a company, we end up willy-nilly having to provide all that. But this is something, if we were in the European context, I'm not talking about international migration, I'm just talking about this issue of how, it's a non-issue. In the remotest of the Swiss villages or the remotest of the German villages, if we had a manufacturing plant there, we would not have to worry about providing this other ecosystem of infrastructure, recreation, or quality of life issues. So this is something peculiar to India, and I don't know, this is somewhere where it's not just, the burden should not only be on the private company, but perhaps it's a combination of government and private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you covered, like a true economist would covered a wide range of issues. All of them are relevant. Now I would call Mr. Nayak, former Senior Vice President and Group Head Mobility and Assurance, Infosys, to bring in the perspective, particularly from information technology, which has set up the path for a large number of people who can find meaningful employment outside India.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to come here. When you called me, that I said I'm not working for Infosys. No, still you have to come. That's why I'm here. Thank you. So just retired from Infosys. So in this globalization, irrespective of whether it's IT or non-IT, people has to move from one location to other location, one country to other country. Depends on the skill need. Okay, if India is not able to provide that kind of skills, definitely other countries will take. For example, Philippines, though it is a small country, they are capturing the BPO business, right? So we young India, should take this opportunity, or we should grab this opportunity. That's what our keynote speaker from the ILOC said, that India has to grab this opportunity. Okay, so that is one. So in the globalization, second thing, how to grab this opportunity today. The skills, changing skills. It is rapidly changing. For example, I remember in 1999, 2000, when our engineers were coming from Finland, they were bringing the Nokia phones or Ericsson phones for developing and testing. In the custom, they are facing a problem to declare the value because they do not know the value. That phones are getting launched after 2 years. But today, that means that Nokia, Ericsson, they were taking 2 years to develop that phones. Okay. Today, every 3 months, every 6 months, you can see. Now, recently Apple launched the iPhone 7. Everybody is talking next year's i8, right? What are the futures should be there? What are the future would be there? So we have to create that kind of innovative skills. Okay. One of the best model what we are having it in Sweden. In Sweden, these corporates, academia, and government. Okay. They are having a body. Okay, and they will work on the supply chain, including the king. Okay, or the prime minister and the chairmen of all the corporations are the committee members. Okay, so we have to create that kind of forum to see where exactly they're lacking. Of course, now government of India is taking a lot of initiative go to skill centers, etc., etc. But still, the skill centers, unless we are able to recruit them or put them on product of the day, productive of the day one, then of no use. So we have huge number of supply, huge number of demand, but there's a mismatch. If you see the IT, they are facing a lot of problems. Even after the graduate engineering, they have to, for example, Infosys, we are putting 3 months or 6 months in the training minimum. Okay, without that, they are not productive. They are not able to put them. Customers don't want them. Okay, so that is what is required. Okay, the innovative skills. Okay, on the other side, the mobility. One side is the demand from across the globe on the innovative skills, and the third thing is restriction, the Brexit, which you are discussing, right? And you've seen our colleague, he was discussing about US elections, right? Or there are a lot of small stuff. Forget the big countries like US or UK or Germany. Small countries like Singapore, or Ireland or New Zealand or Hong Kong. They are putting a lot of restrictions now. You got the point. So how to tackle that? So they are bringing a lot of restrictions, like I said, the salary level. For example, Switzerland, the minimum salary what you have to pay for just engineer is almost $120,000 plus. Can you imagine? Salary levels are going up. They purposely wanted to increase the salary so that reduce the opportunity for Indians, particularly Indians. Okay. So then, like your audit, they have the quotas, 50% quota, or 1:9 quota, project-wide quota, or yearly quota, etc. Okay, and the documentation. Some of the countries, for example, in Canada, if you wanted to apply the work permit for Canada, you have to get the attestation both from the clients and you, clearly committing that you are not outsourced, you are not offshore, and you are not retrenched for the last 2 years and will not for the next 2 years. The 4 years commitment you have to give. Which company can give like this commitment in this world, right? So they are bringing a lot of tough rules. So what is required here? From the company side, from the government side, you are started that. What we need to do is that we have to work together. Corporate, universities, as well as the government. And what is the need? It is not only for India. I am talking about the global. It may be, and the skills again. There are different skills. It's not that Apple wanted one skill, or in Africa, US they wanted different skills, or African continent they wanted different skills, or Gulf country they wanted different skills. You have to see what is the demand, where is the demand, and you have to skill accordingly. Okay, that is from the one side. And other one, most important thing is that most of the countries, other than your few countries like US, UK, this one, they require a lot of documentation like birth certificate, degree certificate, attestation, legalization. For getting these attestation, legalization take 3 months to 6 months. It's very, very horrible job. How we can simplify that? How we can work together and simplify that? That is important. Okay. And from the corporate side, understanding the laws are important. Very, very important. First of all, laws differ. For example, business is a law. I'm telling you, business is a law. For example, US and UK. For example, in US, in the IT or any other manufacturing industry, there are different stages where the people has to move, right? IT, there are around 9 different stages people has to travel. Okay, one of them, the requirement gathering, okay, or knowledge transfer or short-term training. Okay, in US it is allowed, but in UK it is not allowed. There are other 2 stages. For example, debugging, enhancement. After development, after you implement the software, there may be some bugs.
Now, I think we would like to talk about the issues from a different perspective, from an international, Dr. Meera Sethi, Special Envoy to India, International Organization for Migration. And I would like her to cover particularly the issues of how can we facilitate bilateral, multilateral agreements and facilitation to ease these issues and challenges of migration.
Thank you very much. I think you've given me a tough job. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank my colleagues at FICCI for giving us this opportunity. I was here during the morning inaugural session, and if I look at it from the migration point of view, several aspects came up, and I'd just like to recall them. And these were mentioned by different speakers. I think the need for authentic data. That came up just as we started our. We also heard about the interstate dynamics, what we may call the internal migration. It could be intra, it could be inter, it could be regional. I think they all have their own special needs and policy mechanisms which are important. And the last point which I want to recall from the morning session was diversity. And I thought, and if you look at some of the big corporate houses, especially Nestle and Coca-Cola, you will see that they cannot manage their workforce and their productivity without having a diversified workforce. So diversity, languages, cultures, inter-ethnic groups, tribalism are all part and parcel in what we call the diverse workforce. And this needs to be kept in mind when we talk about skilling. So my presentation, of course, I will try and answer our chair's question, but was trying to focus on 3 points, very simple points, on safe migration, responsible recruitment, and skill development, which we have heard this morning. And before I say anything, I think I need to highlight 2 general points. The need that competition for skilled workforce is becoming extremely acute. We are basically competing for the same markets and for the same skills. So how do we actually achieve these markets and become competitive is extremely important. And this is something we need to keep up front. We've already heard our distinguished speaker from ILO mention about migration being a mega trend of the 21st century and what is happening at the global level. Exactly 2 days from now, the summit will be talking of a global compact. But there's a key difference in the global compact. There's going to be one major issue that the governments have been fighting, and what skills you have, what protection you have is extremely important, and when you return. We did hear one speaker talk about return, but I think that's extremely important. Circular migration, what kind of skills do we have for people? How do we insert them in the market when they return from overseas employment? So when you look at agreements and you look at safe migration as my first point, I'd like to highlight 2 issues here. And here you'll see a slight difference of terminology when I sit next to my colleague from ILO. We're saying that we need robust labor market responsive migration policies. So I'm not just talking of labor policies, because most of the policies are built on national frameworks. We're trying to say we need a much broader framework if you want to be responsive to the market as well as provide the necessary protection for your workers, because most of the labor laws look at the national workforce. The second aspect is that whilst we provide the labor to the qualified and the skilled workers, and while we respond to the labor and skill shortages, we need, by one of our panelists here, is a change in the perception of the public. There's a lot of negative perceptions about migrants, especially when you look at internally in countries at national level. Migrants are not taking away jobs. This takes me to my second point, on fair recruitment mechanisms. We have not heard this morning, but of course I know that FICCI has brought several partners in this very room talking about fair and ethical recruitment. As I heard the speakers this morning, I heard a lot of numbers being mentioned. And what is behind these numbers is extremely important. Once we skill a person, is a person in the right job? Does he have the right competencies? How did we numbers is, of course, it's very important. The big numbers, equally important, but the right skills and the right job, that's where we avoid the mismatch between the supply and the demand. And employers, of course, are the critical actors here, and the demand-driven training programs are extremely important, parity in terms of wages, and we also get better occupational rights. And with that, I think I would just stop here. And on-the-job training is extremely important, and I do not want to repeat that because it was mentioned this morning by some of the speakers. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sethi.